Well, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here. Let me know where you're tuning in from today, and we're going to dive right into this pretty rapid fire session on action planning. We'll go for 30 minutes, and we'll first dive into just the building blocks that we already had started on when we first started on the program. And we're in week 3. Next week will be practice, but this week is about action planning. We just started on clarity, we're on goals, now we're pulling together these foundational tools to be able to help you when you take on big giant projects, or when you are trying to plan out a very prolific month or a prolific couple months. We want to be incredibly intentional with that time, that energy that we spend. So this session today is going to help give you a better sense of focus and clarity on how you do that. So it's going to be fun. So thanks for being here. Let's go. Let's get after it. So today's session, make sure you have a piece of paper, or if you want to follow along with me in Figma, you can. I got the chat open. So if you do have any questions, you can let me know what they are. All right, fantastic. So now that you see Figma, I'm going to zoom in just a tad bit. There we go. And I'm going to zoom in over into the big 6 where we had started. I'll go kind of slow. So remember when we first were starting out on Next Level UX? Next Level UX, reminder, it's all about helping you get way more intentional with the work that you take on, way more designed, way more strategic with how you're moving through your days. So when we were looking at clarity, we first focus on purpose, priorities, opportunities, because we want to be able to know what those things are. Then we shift into how do we want to show up in that moment with our identity, how we want to interact with others, and then what success looks like in that vein. And when we know what those things are, now we can start building our blocks. So much has happened since last week even. I've had so many incredible conversations with founders and people just trying to do good in their communities. And I'm just learning so much about how getting incredibly organized and be able to communicate what you want and what your client or customer wants and needs, and being able to be a shepherd of that information. It is powerful what is possible when you have that level of clarity. You might have put in your purpose, you might have put your list underneath. So now we're going to go down a little bit lower. And then we were looking at this day, week, and month strategy for how you're going to decide your space and your energy towards the work that you do. And then we talked about how we really need to have systems, schedules, rituals, and routines to be able to do that. And that's where action planning is coming into play. Even if I had in my hand, let's just say every week you're trying to work on something that's so important to you. And in that process, you decide that you're going to bucket 2 or 3 different projects. So let's just say project 1 is 1 sheet of paper. Project 2 is another sheet of paper. Project 3 is another sheet of paper. So you have these 3 pieces of paper, these 3 projects. Now, in order to be successful for each of these projects, you could just work on them all individually, or you can get super aligned and then build a system around these 3 projects so that when you work on them, they can all go at the same pace and they can work towards a certain thing. When we action plan, the reason why we map these things out and map the projects and opportunities is because you never know when a certain opportunity is going to pop up. Like even just today, I had this opportunity just pop up, but it came from a reach out that I had. And then that person was at this time and what they needed at the specific time, and the ability to be able to serve and to support that need at a given time. It's like the serendipity and the magic of the world. So now that we know those 3 things, boom, 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 now we got to start thinking, well, what goes on these blank sheets of paper? And then how are these 3 projects going to get moved forward in this day, in this week, in this month? So as you start thinking through, you can take on as big of challenge or big of projects that you want. That could be your preference. But once you know what that preference is, then we have to start planning and working backwards on it. So I'm going to come back over into my Figma drawing. And now that we have this level of focus for what we're going to do today, I'm going to come back down and remind you that if your career and your passion, your project goals, and your personal goals are listed, now let's take just one project that we want to do. And we're going to take that one project and we're going to bring it down with a circle. We're going to bring it down, scroll down just a little bit. Now, this one project, think about what your one project is that you plan to finish this month or you plan to start in the following month. So I got this new project. I'll just call it USA. This is one of the little keywords of one of those projects that I'm going to work on. Now, on this project, I know that there's a lot of moving parts to it. I know that it's something that I'm going to have to learn about. It's a new project. So when I start with this project, I want to think about, well, what is the final outcome or what does success look like for this project? And then I could write that in. So it would be delivering quality information and services. This might relate, you could just say that could relate to a lot of different things. All right. Okay. Well, we want to be able to deliver all of that. Now, as a designer, you can do like 20, 30 things easily a day, especially with AI now. So let's say whatever your discipline is, whatever your role is, if you're an operator, a graphic designer, a business owner, whatever, you can map out the things that you could potentially do in today's world. But what would impact it even more is if you knew what the end state really was, the number of things that you actually do have to finish and complete for a project. You need to know what those steps are. If you haven't ever mapped that out even, you're missing a lot of opportunity to move a project forward way faster inside of your organization. One of the things that I remember most when working at some of these tech companies, when you knew what the full end-to-end process was for shipping code, for delivering a service, for printing a graphic design piece, whatever, you know what the end circle is, like how to finish it and how to complete it, how to do it over and over and over. So if you're working through and trying to take something from start to finish, you have to know what those steps are so that you can improve the system that supports the things that it's doing. So just like an engine needs to run, you need to be able to have really good ingredients or tools or machines in order to make the engine run really well. So you have underlying foundational parts, so how something works or how it becomes frictionless. So all of our products and all of our services have friction. So you want to be able to create a path for how to create a frictionless experience from starting from scratch on something and then building what the end service is. Whether you're coaching people, whether you're building a graphic piece or whatever, the little ingredients of the things that you build in between a start and a finish of a project is where the magic really lies. And the magic really lying is learning about how to create something that's frictionless, how to create something that you can learn from the process so you can learn and get signal. And we're talking about planning right now, like action planning. So if you're thinking about the end state and you need to work yourself backwards, think about how you can visualize how something can be frictionless, like from A to Z. That means you have to go through it yourself. You have to learn about the ins and outs of the industry or the things that you're supporting. And then you start to find the problems in the workflows. Okay, so we need to learn and literally get information about problems so we can reframe those problems into opportunities. So if we can work through how something can become frictionless, learn how to get more information about the problems and opportunities, and then we can start figuring out that step from A to Z. So when we're planning out something and delivering like a quality service in a product or experience, and that could be literally for a family activity that you want to do, like at the end of the week, or it could be something that's just super important to you. You list out what it is and then you work yourself backwards. And one thing that I like to do, so I was talking about these 3 pieces of paper. If I have these 3 pieces of paper and I'm going to write on the piece of paper and I'm going to say project 1, really simple. Project 1. Then I would just draw 5 triangles and then I would write down what are the things that are the biggest needle movers for that project that I need to do. So I need to make a design library to organize the audit. So I'm going to do a design library to organize the audit. What I've been doing for all of my projects is creating these design libraries that allow me to visualize the entire brands or ecosystems that I'm supporting. And then I'll also will be auditing, and I've been doing audits like every day of products and services to better understand the current industry better than what I already know. And again, we're in the process of thinking about and building out our homestead. So we're also thinking about, okay, well, now that we've gotten a survey of the land, we now know the perimeter of our land, we have to figure out where we want fences. We have to figure out on the fences how long we want the fences, what material we want on the fences. We want to be able to have like animals and ducks and different things. We want to be able to make sure that they can stay within the fence of our acreage that we have. So we're auditing. Same thing for a project that you're going to work on. You're going to work on a new project this week? Sweet. Take it on. Understand it. Start with like ChatGPT, Claude, or Codex and do a deep dive audit of the industry and just say audit and synthesize this work ahead. Give me a 50-page document and help me understand this industry. Now, if we know that what we want to do is get to a design library that's going to show us how to visualize this entire ecosystem of what we're building, or even if it's just literally a social media artifact that you want, you know what the end game is, you know what you could or potentially do with an audit. Now you get to fill in the blanks of the needle movers, which the audit is a major needle mover. The design library is a major needle mover. But then what would be helpful? What kind of conversations do you want to have about the projects, the work that you're going to be doing? You might want to be able to design your first pitch, your first wireframe presentation, the first prototype that you want to be able to create. Those are all examples of some needle moving actions. So I'll say first prototype, boom, got it listed. All right. Then we're going to do the first presentation and then the first team kickoff. All right. Now I wrote them out and I'll write them back inside of Figma as well. But you have your first prototype, your first presentation, and maybe your first team kickoff meeting. This is just an example of one project, right? You could do this in one single day, one meeting where you could accomplish all of these things within an hour's time span. These things used to take months to do, or even like 2 to 4 weeks to do. You can now do them in a day, and you can literally like even take a screenshot of this and ask Claude, Codex, or ChatGPT 5.5 version, pro version. You could probably even ask Gemini. But what you do is you take this, and this could be your action plan for one of your projects for 1 week, 1 day. It could be for 1 hour, and you could program this and make this happen. That's just one example. So this is just one example of your project 1. Now you could repeat that and do that same thing. So we're learning about the opportunities. And now if I had my 5 things that I wanted to do, I'll move these. So these circles were kind of representing like flow. So we have audit, products, and industry. We have our first prototype, our first presentation, and our first team kickoff, and our design library to organize and audit our brand. All right, so this could be like our first 5 things, right, for one project. Now it's important to like go big, think capable, think you're strong, think you're efficient, think you're effective. And when you're working through this like first series of things, now you can start doing it at a grander scale. And to do it at grander scale, it's like thinking about, well, you don't just have to operate as a senior designer or a director of product. You can think about yourself as a director and an operator of your entire discipline. If you're a designer, it's an entire discipline, or you're a product person, entire discipline. Because now you have the capability to organize this information way more strategic so you can tackle any of your projects and tackle any of these things that you're doing. You don't have to work in these weekly cadences. You can do it in daily sprints. So if we do have that and we're working through it and you're doing that across multiple projects, now it's a matter of your ability to decide how much you want to take in and work through every week. Like I was showing you this visual here where what does your flow look like? And is it designed through the week, or are you just reacting to a lot of other things that you don't have to do? If you don't have a plan that you're working through and that you're operating in, it can be the lifeline of your projects, and the lifeline of your things can feel like they take months when really they could just take a couple days. So you have to find a way to organize all the things that are going on in your brain and get them out on paper and start looking at them and start mapping them out so you can have this very clean project workflow. Now, if I come over into my training flow over here in Figma, and I'm going to zoom in over into this view where you can really start thinking about your months and your opportunities in those months. And as you're taking on different projects, the master opportunity for you in becoming a better action planner is starting to think outside of the box. Outside of the box are things that you can think about, and I call them intention blocks. Intention blocks are the way that you ask bigger, deeper questions that help you connect the dots even more around the industry or the project that you're supporting. People support what they create. So if you're creating a plan that's designed strategically for the things that you need to do, the things that you really want and desire, now you're supporting yourself. For example, this first question says systems that need focus. If you're working through a project and you realize that it's friction every day, there's problems every day, there's just noise, chaos, stress, that might mean that there's a system that's broken down upstream that you need to focus, that you need to figure out a way to support, to improve, to get better. And that is vital, but systems that need focus. Think about what those are for you. And if you're seeing other issues, that could be another one. New connections that need to be made. So if you are working through a project and you're realizing it feels a little fragmented, there's quite a bit of issues between two different departments. There might need to be just an open line of communication between designer A and designer B, or product manager A and product manager C. It's really vital to understand where those systems are breaking down, because you might need to be able to connect those with other people. Same thing goes with your family too. If you're working through and you're finding issues with something that's going on with your family, that might be something that you also need to do. Priorities that need action. There might be priorities that you have, but you haven't been able to take steps. So you need to have these intention blocks where you're going to deliberately decide and design to take actions on priorities that deserve your time. Then there might be new projects that you need to start thinking about or start planning. You're having intention blocks to be able to do that. This is all part of your planning repertoire, and you need these sorts of moments to ask these questions. There might be things that, even like learning how to do action planning, you might realize you gotta practice a little bit more on how you're scheduling and planning out your week. You're not getting enough done. You're not being intentional about it too, so you're not being as prolific as you could be. Then it might be like, well, which projects need more flow, or what outcomes do I need to focus on, or what new initiatives do I need to explore and test? What new ideas do I need to build new momentum around? Who are some people that I need to even ask for some feedback? How could I look at that? And then what are some people that maybe need feedback or guidance that I just had a meeting with and they weren't, maybe coming prepared, and I need to be able to give them the feedback about that. All of these things are going to feed your action plans. What new learnings and insights could you take on, or which people and projects need more facilitation, more shepherdness? Like as a designer, as a creator, you have that special gift to harness the dots, connect the dots for people, and then visualize those dots, whether it's through, an art piece, a photo, or design. You have that capability and you get to do it. And then what are some other personal areas that you can focus on? Now, once you have these types of reflections happening, then you're back to thinking about your Monday through Sunday workflows and how you're doing it and how you're connecting. Then you break down these projects that you're working on, and you literally just do one at a time and you structure and organize it. And you can do that inside the platform, and you can do that just by creating rocks and then adding 4 or 5 line items, just like I was showing you here. And you can do this inside the product. So let me actually show you how you could do that inside the product. So let me just open up a new window and come over into Next Level UX. And I want to have you spend time practicing this. And when we're thinking about action planning, and then I'm going to show you how to do it in the platform. So stick around for a second. You start out with big imaginative thinking, big ambitious, bold thinking about what the outcome or goal or dream or what success looks like. You write that down. Once you know what that is, then you write down your first starting lines, which I think is still going to be like an audit, a professional product and design industry audit. I mean, I would just say start from scratch and do that if you haven't ever done it. That's going to be really powerful for you. All right, cool. So you got the app. And what we're just referring to is how do you action plan inside this tool? So the whole thinking about why this product exists is because people are very, very bad at planning. And they're only bad at planning because they're not just taking a step to like write down the things that they want to do. They try to remember a lot of it. They do a lot of stuff naturally through muscle memory or just going through, with the education system, or like they get conditioned to do it a certain way. Now, what I'm trying to do is just uncondition you to think bigger and bolder about things that you want to do every day, every week, every month. Mix in a little bit of that lifestyle design, mix in a little bit of that project design, mix in a lot of that intentional design, and properly work through your days, weeks, and months strategically. So if we do that, you know that every day, every week, every month, you have an opportunity to like plan and structure and design that in. So you can do that here in the sessions, but you can also do it on a weekly cadence where you can look at your weeks, and you can also do it on your monthly cadence so that you can design how you approach the month. A lot of people use all sorts of tools, but I do really appreciate having the ability to have this in a system so that I can go over to my plans. I can decide that I'm trying to onboard you. So I have what we accomplished in the first 7 days, working through that. That's great. We worked on our goals. Great. We have career, passion, project, and personal goals. And now we're focusing on action planning. So I was focused last week in thinking about Jude, Jamie, and Drew, but I could also add in other things for each of the individual projects that I'm working on. So if I have I'm working on this one tool called My Trainer Connect. I'm working on another tool that's called Next Level UX. I'm working on another tool that's called, it's more of I'll just say sports in the NIL industry, the name, image, likeness for sports and athletes and training kids how to learn these tools. And then there's other things, right? So I'm making a moment where I can have this setup, and then I can go in, and for this onboarding, this is like a higher level of operating for me teaching these sorts of things. Next week, we're going to be focused on practice. So I'm already you can set up very simple ways to design and form your intention in the platform. And you can, like I said last week, you can always export, share, download, ask AI for a little bit of help on these things, as far as if you need help with structuring or getting feedback about your projects, you can do that here too and get some pro tips. And action planning was a super powerful way for you to tackle way more and have way more impact. I love that about these. You can just take a very simple list and put it into a higher level of operating system. So what are some typical problems that people come against when it comes to action planning? Let's look at this, because once you know where that friction is going to be, then you can kind of repivot and refocus your energy on things that truly matter. Some friction points. One friction point that people typically do is they skip the auditing process. If you don't do an audit, then you don't know really the landscape or what's possible and what could or couldn't work. Be sure to do an audit of a company that you're working for. And I can help you do this if you don't know exactly how to go about it. Like the example of just going to Claude, ChatGPT, Codex, or even Bolt, like all these AI tools, you just do an audit, like ask for an audit for a synthesis of it. Bring in everything that you've ever wanted to know about the topic, whatever industry it is, start there. Then you want to start thinking about what's the outcome you're shooting for, right? People that don't do well with planning, they don't really know what they want to, they don't know what good looks like at the end of the tunnel. They don't know what success looks like. And that could be something that you ask for as well with ChatGPT, AIs, and you ask for what would be success. And that might be an extra 100 grand a year, or it could be you want to grow X amount more vegetables a year. It could be you want to help your company drive another 10 to 20 million dollars in revenue in their business. That's what success looks like. So what do we need to do in order to make that happen? Just having that conversation respectfully, maturely, and then working your way backwards to the things that you can actually be responsible for and do to help move that needle. That's where the true power of action planning comes in. But we don't just want to plan. We want to have organization. So that's where another problem comes in, where people are doing actions that they've been told versus actions that align with their core values, their core mission. That's why I typically start with clarity. Then I start with goals. Then I start with understanding your planning, action planning methods. Because you have a strong core foundation with your goals and your clarity, and you've done the work yourself, now you can start aiming that energy, boom, 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 wherever you need to aim it. And then show up in that moment, in that ability to go really take it on. So the friction comes from not knowing, the friction comes from not having clarity, the friction comes from not having goals. But let's just say that all those things, you're a very hard worker, but you still just don't know what you want to do. That's where you need to go back into your passions or your personal, like your fitness or your getting out in nature, so that you have space to allow your brain to wander into the areas of life and the areas that really connect with you the most, so that you know what industry you might need to work in. And that could release you in trying to figure out maybe you should be doing something different if you don't know like what your purpose is, or if you're trying to figure it out, or if you're young and you're just growing and you're trying to, then I would still challenge you to document what your personal project, career, and passion goals are. Where do you get most excited? And then you can go and lean into those areas and focus on those areas. Do an audit, think about what success looks like, work backwards, find the friction in the company, find the friction in the experience, and then try to reduce the friction. And then when you reduce the friction, what happens with people is they get happy, they get excited, they get more fulfillment when they're removing friction from their life. And not that all friction is bad, but if you can design a frictionless experience where people just love to use your products, your services, they like to work with you, they like to be in your energy, then you're far better off in reaching success, because you're serving a broader and deeper community, a deeper intention. And that's a very powerful thing that I want to leave you with today. I talked about action plan, I talked about goals, I talked about these foundations that you learn, but the next week we need to start thinking about practice. Now, building a practice is a huge part of being a high performer. It's a huge part of having the confidence to learn really difficult things and to take on big, bold initiatives. If you can build a practice and learn how to get better at something, then you can take on anything. You can take it on and find ways to get better. Same thing with baseball, same thing with wrestling, same thing with football. You learn the plays, you learn the recipes, you learn the moves, and then you can operate them, muscle memory, and just do them. So for practice next week, I want to make sure that by next week, you have gone through your clarity homework, your goals homework, your action planning homework, and that you have a very clear idea of how you want to operate heading into the second half of May. And in the second half of May, think about every time that you sit at your desk, every time that you have an engagement with your family, every time that you decide you're going to put this priority at the top of your list and you're going to work on it. When you practice, think about how you can show up at your very best in the energy that you're going to do to create the thing. What kind of energy are you going to create, and how are you going to embody and model it? You're going to practice it by modeling these things. And then the following week from there, we'll go into more strategic practices of design productivity, design clarity, design energy, and design impact. These are kind of like the multipliers that you can apply to your companies and your businesses to have more effective teams, to have more effective programs and operations, and to measure really truly what matters most. I'm really excited about that upcoming workshop and that upcoming event. We talked about planning, talked about practice, which is next week. And we talked about some friction that can happen for people that are planning. One of the other big challenges that people have with action planning is just getting too in their way for how they decide how perfect something has to be before they put to somebody or they share it. And this was an early problem for designers where they do a first draft and they don't want to share it right away. And now that with AI, you can create an instant first draft like within 2-3 minutes, there's no reason to not be showing your work and to be getting feedback about your work. So it's a reminder to never stop getting or giving feedback about things that you're working on, and make sure you're putting in time and energy into getting feedback about things that you're working on. That's super vital and important. So I want to encourage you to do the work, do the audits, do the first prototype, the first presentation, like do the things that I was suggesting in here. What I want to encourage you to do is go have fun creating this week. Go get after it. Go be your best. Go get it. And let's stay connected. So I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day. If you've got questions, please put them in the community, or you can paste them to me directly. You can DM me. I'd love to hear your thoughts, questions, any challenges you're facing with action planning. We can work through those things. And sometimes you just need to talk it out and work through those things. So we'll do that together. I hope you have an awesome rest of your day, and we'll see you then. All right, see you. Bye.